My name is Farayi Zimudzi, and I am the representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. It is my honor to just, provide a little bit of a sense of the issues that pertain to women's participation in agriculture. And I'm going to be making these remarks based on largely two sets of work that have been conducted recently. The most recent one being the current state of food security and nutrition in the world for 2021, entitled Transforming Food Systems for Food Security, Improved Nutrition and Affordable Healthy Diets for All. And this is published by a number of United Nations agencies, including FAO, IFAD, World Food Programme, UNICEF, and the World Health Organization. The second basis on which I make some of these remarks is a study that FAO Namibia commissioned in 2017 that specifically looked at profiling, the gender in agriculture and rural livelihoods in Namibia. So the idea really is to provide a few facts and figures, raise some issues that are affecting the sector from a gender perspective, and then also to provide some thoughts in terms of what could be some of the actions that can be taken in addressing the issues identified. So if we start perhaps from a global perspective, if I can just raise a few issues that are relevant, I think the first one is, if we look at issues around undernutrition, food insecurity, and poverty, it definitely has a female face. So in other words, women are predominantly more affected than men are in terms of some of the challenges that are observed. So for example, the levels of anemia globally amongst women are much higher than they are for men. And also, if we look at some of the sustainable development goals, and in particular, goal number 2 on zero hunger, you find that even before COVID hit us all, the situation was that we were not going to meet the targets with respect to this goal. And now it's even worse with COVID having hit us. And the trend is the same for Namibia. And if you look at issues around the issues on prevalence of undernutrition, which is one of the key indicators around that second sustainable development goals, you find that countries that have high income inequality, that are impacted by climate extremes, as well as those countries that are in conflict, which thankfully for Namibia is not the case, and those suffering from economic downturns, they have seen an uptick in the prevalence of undernutrition, which, as I said, is a key indicator in terms of sustainable development goal number 2. And then the largest increases in terms of prevalence of undernutrition, they are observed in African countries due to the presence of many of the drivers that I've indicated just now. And for Namibia, I'm sure you can see that issues around income inequality, climate extremes, and economic downturn, these are issues that definitely are impacting us here. And if we turn it around and look at Namibia specifically, the female population is around 51%, so we have slightly more women than men. And then we also know that we have a much more youthful population than in a lot of places. More than around 2/3 of Namibia's population is below the age of 30 years. So we have a predominantly female population and a predominantly youthful population. And then we look at the sector itself. 70% of the population is directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods, and the bulk of which is in the smallholder sector. In other words, subsistence agriculture. And from some of the studies that we've done, we've noticed that women are much more dependent on subsistence agriculture than men are. And then the poverty profile, you find that women are much more like, women-headed households are much more likely to be poor than male-headed households. And once again, from this data, I'm sure you can see that, there is a definite female face to the, to the issues that I'm raising here. And also, if you look at one more thing before perhaps I move on in terms of, what are some of the challenges. You look at the strong rural to urban migration that we know characterizes Namibia. That also is impacting in terms of poverty levels, especially now with COVID having hit us and the unemployment having gone up as a result of a lot of the sectors being affected by the COVID pandemic. So some of the issues, for example, if we move on to look at, the challenges, opportunities and challenges, let's put it that way. Namibia has a rich policy environment, especially in the areas of agriculture and rural development. However, you will note that for most of these policies, gender is not mainstreamed, and they tend to be gender neutral or silent on issues of gender. And this is despite the fact, the facts that I've outlined before, the higher participation of women in smallholder agriculture, the higher poverty rates for women-headed households, and so on. And the fact that, these policies are gender neutral is a challenge in itself, because then it affects, the possibility and the ability of these gender issues to be programmed and implemented on the ground. And then again, another opportunity that exists in Namibia is the existence of a good structure, at least on paper, to coordinate gender at national level. However, there's a need for institutional capacity strengthening to enable the mechanism to function well, not just at the capital level in Windhoek, but also at all levels, to the lowest possible levels in the communities, the people that are actually affected by climate change, people that are affected by high levels of undernutrition. And then you look at the capacity, as I've hinted just now, capacity within the sector and even at the higher level to drive gender issues, mainstreaming of gender issues, it also needs to be strengthened. So that is a challenge that needs to be addressed if we are to ensure the full and comprehensive participation of women within the sector, the agriculture sector. And then another issue that besets and that needs to be addressed is the absence of sex disaggregated data in both the agriculture and rural development sectors. We cannot address what we have not been able to quantify. Otherwise, we are shooting in the dark. So the issue of data, the issue of monitoring, the issue of then addressing on the basis of evidence cannot be overemphasized. And so the female face of agriculture and rural development, we need to address it, and we need to do so by maybe taking a more holistic approach rather than a piecemeal approach that often happens through projects and so on. Not that there's anything bad with projects, but we do need to ensure that, we are taking a holistic view, gathering the information as I've mentioned before, and then ensuring that we understand better the interactions within the food systems and then identify entry points for interventions that then address those particular challenges. And then, of course, the need to address the drivers or the root causes of undernutrition that I've also mentioned. So what to do? I think, yes, indeed, the policy environment is excellent, but we need to do a review of that policy and then systematically mainstream gender equality programming in sectoral strategies and work plans. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, developing a monitoring and evaluation system to collect, analyze, and disseminate sex disaggregated data, and as well as, undertaking the necessary capacity strengthening within the sector from a gender perspective, ensuring that we can truly mainstream gender and we can address and we can reverse some of the trends that we see. And another recommendation is a review of trade laws and policies to ensure that gender is mainstreamed. So we are looking at the entire chain from production all the way to consumption and trade so that women are able to actively participate. and then targeted capacity building of gender focal points within the sector ministries and appointing senior staffs to this role of being gender focal points so that they can actually have the muscle, the weight to drive and to bring the other colleagues on board. And then empowerment of youth and women through targeted and viable programs that enable them to participate along the various parts of the food system and agricultural value chains. And then the focus, in my opinion, should be on both financial and economic inclusion, material provision, and capacity development. And there are some good practices in Namibia that can be built upon, and also beyond Namibia, elsewhere on the continent, that we can learn from and adapt for the context of Namibia. And then finally, I think provision of targeted support packages cannot be again overemphasized. And often there is a tendency to consider women as a homogeneous group, which is far from the case actually. So different women, depending on where they are within the system, they require different type of approaches. So I think the whole issue of data and understanding what is going on and then identifying targeted solutions accordingly is critical. So those are some of the few issues that I wanted to bring forward. Nothing exhaustive, but just some of my own perspectives based on some of the information available. Thank you very much.